One thing I've mentioned a lot, several times throughout the course, is the idea of the Ketu castle and the jungle outside the castle. So I want to talk about that a little more in this video in preparation for the Rahu and Ketu conjunct, the planets videos, which will be coming next. Because this is a really important concept to understand. Because we're basically going to talk about how the influences of Rahu and Ketu behave on different planets. And it's not such a simplistic thing that we can just say, oh, it's conjunct Rahu or it's not. We have to kind of understand a lot more around that. So that's why I'm getting into this class now. So we really understand this going into the planetary influences that Rahu and Ketu are affecting. So Ketu means flag. And the flag is a secure territory. You say, this is my territory. Okay? Now, flags are used in various cases. They're used when an army is marching to war. And they say, okay, where I am is my territory. I own this land. This is martial law, where my flag is, where my territory is, where my troops are. And the opposing force is going to try to destroy that territory, of course. Okay, but marching to war, we claim our territory based on where our armies are. But the most secure place of the flag is, the capital, the castle, with its walls and its its weapons and all that good stuff. So that's the most secure place for the flag to be. And so that's why I call it the Ketu castle. A castle is like a fort. A castle is not a luxurious place to live. A castle is a fort with, cannons or big artillery on the wall of some type, and it's designed for protection. So, in Parashara tells us only a few things about Rahu and Ketu, but they're all very profound things. One thing is that Rahu and Ketu represent the planetary army. So Ketu literally means flag. It represents the planetary army. So again, it's this very secure place that's guarding the flag. Now, what is the flag? This flag is a symbol of the country. It's a symbol of what's most important in that country. It's a symbol of what that country is. So people rally to the flag. My flag means this, it symbolizes this. Freedom of spirit, whatever, depending on the culture and the country. But it symbolizes what people see as noble in that country. So what does a flag symbolize within us? Within us, the flag symbolizes the most truthful thing that we are. And this is Ketu. And this is what we're trying to guard by keeping it in the flag in the castle. Got it? So the flag is what we need to keep secure. It's what we need to keep safe. It's the most important thing. It's a symbol of the most important thing, okay? Therefore, it becomes the most important thing as the symbol. And what is the most important thing? We're the most important thing, right? Okay? Our well-being, our consciousness is the most important thing. And Ketu represents those things, all right? And we're going to talk more about Ketu in the context of the army in a future video after I get done with the planets. But for now, we're going to look at this most secure place to keep the Ketu, to keep the flag, and that is the castle or the fort. So imagine the fort. You've got, your high walls, and the walls, in the center you've got your living quarters, and you've got your, the castle proper. But the castle has the walls, and maybe even has a moat. But it has protection around it. It has a perimeter that's safe. So anytime there's a threat, everyone runs behind the castle walls. They slam the castle walls, and everyone's safe. So while there might be some things outside the castle walls, on the edge of the walls, at any time of threat, everyone retreats behind the castle walls. Okay? And then when it's safe, they venture outside the castle walls to get done what they need to outside the castle walls. Go hunting, collect their crops, things like that. Okay? So imagine this type of society. And that's how we are with our Ketu castle. When we feel safe, we venture outside the castle walls. We don't venture deeply outside the castle walls. That's the jungle, that's Rahu. But we do go out the castle walls. And when we're outside the castle walls, we realize that it's not totally safe there. But we can always run back behind the castle walls and slam the gate. So we're willing to go outside the castle walls within reason, within sight of the castle walls. Okay? That's what we do with our Ketu position. We're willing to step outside our security paradigm, but only as long as we can keep in sight the castle walls. So that the minute our security gets threatened, we run back inside. Okay? And that's what we're literally doing. And that's why it's so hard for people to go to the Rahu house completely. In fact, I would say people don't go to the Rahu house completely until their Rahu maturation. Unless they're actually like really enlightened beings, okay? We don't go to Rahu completely. We don't venture deeply into the jungle, not with full force, until the Rahu maturation, shows us the necessity of that. Before that, we only go as far away from the Ketu castle as we can still see the castle walls. But that's not far enough, okay? But the reason we don't is we don't feel safe enough. We can't take enough force and power to go further than the castle walls. Now, if we were really a powerful kingdom, meaning a person with great confidence, self-esteem, and knowing themselves, and with all their parts aligned, a good communication chain with themselves where the mind, the sun, the king, is having conversations daily with the queen and the moon. And so there's a correlation between what a person thinks and what they're feeling and what they're doing and what they need. So once we have all that, once we start gathering that up and we're more aligned beings, then we're a more powerful force. At that point, we can go deep into the jungle. We can go into the Rahu. Okay, it's the same way. Once the castle gets strong and they got surplus food and they can have enough food to supply an army and they have enough men and enough money to feed that men, then they can marshal a huge force outside the castle walls, go deep into the jungle and find something new, find something that changes their whole culture. Okay? Like when the Spanish went to South America, they were a powerful country, they financed, Columbus. Columbus cruises out, discovers the New World, and now, Spain was able to have the courage to risk the 3 ships and the expense of the 3 ships and a lot of men. They had the power to risk that and not have it destroy their country. So they were able to discover the New World. Okay? Same with us. Once we get strong enough within ourselves and aligned enough within ourselves, and our communication systems within themselves are working good enough, at that point we become strong enough to actually go into the jungle. But until then, we are just like those Spanish sailors. We will only sail as far away as we can still see the coastline. So that's how they used to sail. As long as they could see the coast, they would be okay. And that's how we do it with our Ketu. As long as we can see the castle walls, we'll go that far. But that's not far enough to discover the New World. That's not far enough to change our whole culture. So the Spanish, they go there, and all of a sudden they bring back all these foods. They bring back all this wealth that has changed the whole culture of Europe. You can't go to Europe and not eat something from South America, right? You can't go anywhere in the world. You can't go to India, without eating a potato, a chili, or a tomato. The 3 common foods that originated from South America. So this is what we're trying to do with our Rahu. We're trying to gear up the courage and the need to go into the new world, to get an experience that changes our whole culture, which means changes us. Okay? But we weren't really willing to do that. The need's not great enough until the Rahu maturation. Until then, we don't want to leave sight of the castle walls. So while we might be in our Rahu, looking towards Rahu, looking towards the jungle of Rahu, we always got one eye on the castle wall. So how can we really see and experience and get something useful from that jungle? We can't. And that's why people can't make their Rahu house work, because they want to stay inside of the castle walls. Okay? Now, that's okay. They're supposed to stay inside the castle walls, or in sight of the castle walls, and always be close enough that they can retreat to the safety of the castle walls whenever they feel threatened. They're supposed to do that. It takes time to develop the need and the confidence and the strength to leave the castle walls and truly focus on what's ahead of us. And so we're supposed to take our time with this. It's not a criticism to say, oh, you're not approaching your Rahu and you're 36 years old. Okay? No, you're not lacking courage. You know, you're not supposed to. But if you're 55 years old and you still haven't even tasted your Rahu, something has really been holding you back. You're like the person who has never grown up enough to leave the side of the castle walls. Okay? Okay. And at that point, you have to really be encouraged to leave the side of the castle walls. Okay? So in the chart, we have our Ketu. That's the castle. That's the tower, the castle, where we can see everything. And that's the secure, fortified, most fortified, protected place. Then around the castle, we have the grounds. And in the grounds, there's all kinds of good stuff. Lots of things we need. There's the bazaar, there's the market, there's the entertainment. There's everything we need to be okay. Okay? Then there's the castle walls themselves. In the chart itself, if we go 90 degrees backwards from K2 and 90 degrees forward from K2, that's the castle wall. So everything on this side of the wall is under the rule of K2. Everything on the other side of the castle wall is under the rule of Rahu. And when we're feeling safe enough and there's no external threats, we'll cross the wall, go through the gate of the wall, play around here, and keep an eye out for threats. Whenever there's a threat, we run back into the castle wall, slam the gates. Okay? But it's by dealing with threats that we grow. It's by dealing with things that perturb us, scare us, bother us. By overcoming those things that we grow. And so, running back into the castle doesn't serve us well. And so, but we always do that. We pretend to want Rahu, and we pretend to work towards Rahu, but we're constantly on the alert for a threat from Rahu, a threat jumping at us from the jungle. And as soon as that threat comes, we go back to our Ketu, we slam the doors, and we lose Rahu, and we get disappointed. Okay? So you want to understand in the chart, we literally have these two halves. All right? 180 degrees on Ketu's half, 180 degrees on Rahu's half. Okay? And the planets are going to fall in these places. So planets are either going to be in the castle walls, or they're going to be in the jungle, or they're going to be right around 90 degrees from Rahu and Ketu, where they're on the perimeter. They're sitting on the wall. A planet that's like exactly 90 degrees is literally sitting on the wall, which means it can jump to this side of the wall or jump to the other side of the wall, or it's standing in the gateway, so it can go out or it can go in. It's right there at that critical place. And those planets, of course, the ones that are closest to this perimeter, those are the planets that are the least influenced by Ketu and Rahu. Because they're not so close to the Ketu that they're like, okay, I have to be right in the most safest place to be secure. But they're not in this really scary jungle where, oh my gosh, what do I do next? I just have to survive out here. They're in a place where they're kind of in a very comfortable place. They're not really getting threatened by the unknown of the jungles. But they're not in the deep need of being in the most secure part of the castle. Okay? So those planets are, why I say those planets are really important for our development, because they're not basically influenced by Rahu and Ketu so much. They're planets we can use most consciously. Because see, a planet, as it gets closer to Ketu, becomes more and more under the pull of our security paradigm, which means it's more and more has a great need for security. It needs to be safe. It doesn't want to change. It doesn't want to grow. It doesn't want to experience something new, because new is scary. So the planets on the Ketu side are, better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. So even though they're not doing really happy, it's still okay, it's good, it works, it's better than risking this, Okay, it's like, the sailors. We want to sail to India, so we'll just sail all the way down the coast of Africa, all the way up the coast of Africa, and over. It's like, okay, that works. But, it's kind of a long voyage, and it's kind of scary going south of the coast of Africa. Not really scary, but it's not the best place to go sailing during all parts of the year, because you get pretty far south, so you can have some severe winter storms down there. Nothing like South America, but still, enough to be concerned about. But it works, and they've been doing it for hundreds of years. Then Columbus says, no, how about we just sail around the world and go another way that'll be shorter. He thought it would be shorter. He didn't know how big the globe was. It actually is much longer to go around the world. But he didn't know that. But he was like, let's try a different way. Let's risk and gamble on the possibility of finding a new way. And that's ultimately what we have to do with our Rahu. We have to make this gamble. But the planets inside the walls, closer to Ketu, they're so invested in security, they don't want to make that gamble. It's just not worth it to them. They're like, it's good enough sailing around the coast of Africa. We really don't need to go around the world to get there. It works to go this way. And yeah, it takes way longer than we want to. And so our profits are way less. And we have to deal with all those pirates along the coast of Africa and all that stuff. But it works, and we've been doing it, and it's good enough. Even though, yeah, it's not my dream life. Okay, but then the Rahu is, so all the planets on the Ketu side have this security. They're a little bit held back. And that's why I said, when more planets are on the Ketu side of the chart, it becomes harder for the person to embrace the Rahu. Because those planets are like, this is working good enough. Okay? Then we have planets on the Rahu side. Those planets, and the closer they get to the Rahu, not just on the Rahu side, but as they get closer to Rahu, they're deeper into the jungle. And we need those planets. We need to experience those planets. Every planet on the Rahu side of the chart is a planet we need, but to get it, we have to go into the jungle. All right? So the more planets on the Rahu side, the greater our incentive to go into the jungle. The closer they get to Rahu, the greater the incentive. Okay? Meaning the greater the need. Okay, because we want those planets. We want all 7 of our planets. In fact, we need all 7 of our planets to function healthily to be healthy adults. Okay? So we have to go into the jungle to get those planets. The closer they are to Rahu, the deeper in the jungle they are. Which means the scarier it is to go get them. Got it? Okay? So any yoga, any planetary formation you have that's on the Rahu side, to get it, you have to deal with more fears. The closer it is to Rahu, the scarier it is to go get it. The deeper you have to go into the jungle. The more you get more of that planet as you get older. The more of that planet you get after your Rahu maturation compared to before your Rahu maturation. You get more of your planets on the Ketu side before the Rahu maturation, because you're staying in the castle. Once you get mature enough to venture out into the jungle, which means become confident enough, you know yourself enough, you know what you really need more enough to make that trip into the jungle worthwhile, then you're more willing to move towards and really develop those other planets. Okay? So you've got all of your good yogas on the Rahu side of the chart. Your success and fame will be better after your Rahu maturation than before. If, on the other hand, you've got all your good planets on the, good yogas on the Ketu side of the chart, then your success and stuff and good stuff in life will come more in the early part of your life. And your desire will be not to leave that and go into the Rahu, into the Rahu jungle. But something will push you into the jungle. And you need to go into that jungle to fully experience all the good stuff in the castle. But going into the jungle won't nearly be as wonderful as it was hanging out in the castle, but you still have to do it. Okay? Otherwise, you can't really enjoy and appreciate fully all the stuff in the castle. All right? So, we have this side of the chart. And when I talk about the conjunctions, I'll call it conjunctions, but I'll probably call it conjunctions. Or maybe I'll call it close by. Because it doesn't matter what planet's in the sign with Rahu. It doesn't matter, or with Ketu. What matters is the closest planet to Rahu, the closest planet to Ketu. I learned this really vividly with a horoscope I was using for a homeopathic client who was ill. And they had 2 planets. One was with Rahu in the same sign. And the other one was in the sign next to Rahu, but closer to Rahu in degrees. And I knew, I had worked the case, I knew they needed this remedy or this remedy. And I was like, which one is it? Is it for this planet or is it for this planet? The one with Rahu or the one that's not with Rahu but closer in degrees? After really studying their case and their symptoms and everything, I decided it had to be the planet that was closer to Rahu, not the one that was in the same sign. And I, gave the remedy. They had a remarkable healing that helped them with things that so much that they said, wow, I didn't know this part of me could actually feel this good. Okay? And it only took one dose of the medicine or the remedy, and that just sent them on a healing curve for several months until they were doing better than ever. So I was thinking, that's weird. I would have thought I really would have needed the remedy for the Rahu conjunct planet, because I would have normally ignored the other planet, right? But then I started, so that prompted this huge research and this investigation, and I was just like shocked of how critical it is as planets, how critical the planets are that get closer to Rahu or closer to Ketu. So when I say a planet with Rahu, well, that doesn't mean just we want to ignore the signs. We just want to take the signs and toss them. And we just want to use degrees. I want to say, okay, everything 90 degrees be fine, and in front of Ketu is influenced by Ketu. And the closer in degrees it is, the more it's influenced by Ketu. Everything that's 90 degrees in front or behind of Rahu is influenced by Rahu. And the closer it is to Rahu, the more it's influenced by him. So the planets on the fence, at around 90 or so degrees from Rahu and Ketu both, those planets are the least influenced by Rahu and Ketu, which means they're the planets we can use most consciously and clearly without fears of the jungle and without the great need for security. The closer they get to Ketu, the more the need for security is. And the closer they get to Rahu, the scarier it is to investigate those planets, because the jungle is getting deeper and darker and scarier. Okay? So we need to keep this in mind when we look at people's charts. So even if they don't have a planet conjunct Rahu or Ketu, we just have to find what planet is closest to Rahu and Ketu. I recently had a chart of a real psychopath, a really crazy, crazy person. And at first glance, the chart looks wonderful. I mean, it has some good yogas, it has some good power, it just has some really, really nice things. But then the closest two planets to Rahu were Saturn and the Moon, which are the two scariest planets to have close to Rahu, that create the most fear in the mind of the person. And as a result, this person has all kinds of issues you wouldn't have expected. You would have looked for, based on this, if you'd heard about this person's behavior, you would have said, I bet this person has something crazy like a Rahu Moon Saturn conjunction. That's what you would have thought off the top of your head. You said, this person has to have a Rahu Saturn Moon conjunction. Let me see your chart. And you would have looked at his chart and said, wow, he has a nice yoga here, he's got a good thing here. And you'd be going, why? I just don't get it, Rahu's even in an Upachaya house. It's not in a bad place, if I remember right. But indeed, Rahu and Saturn and Moon were right next to Rahu. Okay, in different houses, but they were the closest planets, and they were both within 30 degrees of Rahu. And so that upset the whole chart, changed everything in the chart. And you would have missed it if you hadn't have known this idea. Okay, so on this chart, if I was going to read it, I would go, okay, let's read the effects. Let's talk about the effects of Rahu with Saturn. What does that do to a person? Let's talk about the effects of Rahu with Moon. What does that do to a person? And that would have given us a huge deal of information on that person. Okay? And we'll start talking about those effects in the next group of videos. Okay? So keep that in mind. We got these two distinct sides of the chart. Okay? Most astrologers, actually no astrologer looks at it that way. What most astrologers look at is Ketu, as he moves reverse, going to hit the planet, or is Rahu, as it removes the reverse, going to hit the planet? Which means every planet from Ketu going backwards to Rahu is going to get affected by Ketu, meaning Ketu is moving towards it. And every planet from behind Rahu to Ketu is going to be swallowed or affected by Rahu, as Rahu moves through the sky. Okay? And as the planets invariably move towards Rahu. And that's why we have this yoga called Kalasarpa Yoga. Kalasarpa Yoga is when all the planets are on one side, all going to be hit by Ketu or all going to be hit by Rahu. Okay? And some people consider when Ketu is moving towards the Rahu, it's a better Kalasarpa yoga. They call it Amrita Kalasarpa yoga. Okay, like Amrita means like the nice sweet nectar of immortality, versus the shitty Kalasarpa yoga of Rahu moving towards it. And I don't think that's really that important. We're going to talk about it in a moment, but it's not as important as these two halves. So when planets, all the planets are on the Ketu side, I call that castle yoga. Okay? That's a person who has absolutely no reason, no incentive to go outside the Ketu castle. Okay? And if all the planets are on the Rahu side, I call that jungle yoga. Okay? Which means the person has no choice but to venture into the unknown. Okay? And deal with stresses and new things and new experiences. They're going into the jungle. They have no choice. That's where their life is. Their life is in the jungle. Okay? And I find castle yoga and jungle yoga will give just those two yogas will give you a lot of information about the chart. And you can break it into, is it more castle yoga or more jungle yoga, simply speaking. But sometimes you'll see a complete castle yoga or a complete jungle yoga. And I consider that more important from a developmental point of view, from a growth-centered point of view, than the Kalasarpa yoga. Okay? All right. So keep that in mind. So 3 places: the castle, the jungle, and the castle walls. Where are the planets? The more planets on the castle walls, the better the person can navigate between the Ketu Rahu worlds. Good. That's why we like planets on angles or 90 degrees or so from the nodes. The closer the planets are to Ketu, the less motivation the person has to go into the jungle. The more planets on the Rahu side, the more motivation they have to go into the Rahu side. Okay? And the more those planets are influenced by Rahu. So we need to know this when I talk about the actual influences of all the planets influenced by Rahu and Ketu. Okay? All right. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, because of that, again, the planets on the Rahu side of the chart in the jungle, those planets, the person can perform with all those planets better after the Rahu maturation. Okay? It's easy for them to perform well with the planets in the castle from the beginning. Okay? And the important thing to remember, a very, very important thing, which I'm going to expand on after the planetary videos, is that Ketu is the flag. It's a symbol of what's best within us. It's a symbol of who we really are. Okay? What we're ultimately trying to protect in this world is who we are. You know, we're a unique individual. Keyword here is not individual, it's unique. Being a unique individual, it makes us different than everybody else. Because we're different than everybody else, it's hard to know what to do. It's hard to know how to be. How are we supposed to be? We're supposed to be a sovereign country with our flag. And our flag has a symbol on it that is us. And that's what we're trying to grow into. We're trying to figure out, what is our flag? What are we, really? What's the real me? What's the real me? And how do I be okay with the real me? Because it's very hard to be okay with the real me, because everyone around us is different, right? So this person is doing this, and we're like, oh, so if I do like they're doing, it'll be good. I'll be good. If I do what my mom's doing or my dad's doing, or if I understand that my mom or dad does stupid things and I decide to do the non-stupid things instead, that will be who I really am. No, none of that is really you. But that's how we begin to formulate who we are. That's the immature beginnings of how do I decide who I am. I'm not going to do the things that I see people in my life do that is wrong. And I will do the things that people think I need to do or which I get rewarded for. You know, all these games. I'll do the thing that gets me in the least amount of trouble, but is that really you? Is that really your sovereign way of being? No, it never is. It's a way of being based on all the pressures around you. It's kind of like, it's like politics. The little country has to kind of adopt a lot of things on all the powerful countries around them in order not to get stepped on and taken off the map. Okay? So countries do this very same thing to each other. Okay? Because of all the pressure of everyone else, we kind of adapt and adjust into some weird amalgamation of ourselves as, pressurized and created and coerced and, molded by our surrounding people in our lives. Okay? Because we're not really secure enough and safe enough to really be the sovereign country we are, to be okay with that country. And so we're constantly alert for the threats from other countries. We go outside the castle wall and we're waiting for raiders to come by, for instance, okay? We don't want to leave the shores of the ocean, we want to sail beyond the shores that we can see, because who knows what lurks there. There could be monsters, there could be evil people, whatever. So, that sovereign thing we are, we're not able to be okay with it because we're constantly measuring it against the reactions of people, especially our parents. So our parents have a reaction to something we do as our kid, and that makes us decide to become a certain kind of person. Okay? But is that the person we really are? No, it's not. That's the person we're trying to be because of the reaction we had to our parents. That's just who we are in reaction to our parents. Who we are in reaction to somebody else we know. Who we are in reaction to people, basically, particularly our parents, though. But that's not who we are, and so we try to mold ourselves into something we're not, just so we can live in this world as a wimpy little weak country. Okay? Because it feels like if we don't, we'll get demolished by the more powerful countries, namely our parents are the more powerful countries. And by demolished, I don't mean our parents are going to take us out back and whip us, on the butt with a belt until we bleed. I mean, we say something to the parent, and the parent just gives a negative response. Like I remember one of my most profound shocks, when I was a kid, was just such a simple thing. And when I was 11 years old, I was really into magic, and I was learning all these magic tricks, and I was going to put on a little local neighborhood magic show. And I learned a lot of really high-level tricks, actually, for an 11-year-old or 12-year-old. I think I was 11. I was 11, yeah. And so I was walking on a hike with my mom once, and I was really excited about the magic. I'm like, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to be a magician. I was really pumped up and excited about it. And she's like, you should be a doctor. And I was like, what? I should be a doctor. And I just remember just thinking, because here I'm spontaneously saying, I want to be a magician. I want to do magic. And she's like, you need to do a doctor. And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess being a doctor, I could be a doctor, but maybe just do magic shows on the weekend, But it really deflated my way of being, and because of my mom, it was just it wasn't like an angry reaction, it was just this casual, sort of firm but casual reaction of, yeah, you should be a doctor, and so you can make money and survive, But to that little rebuttal to my inspiration at the time felt like just this huge depressing force. And it really wasn't that big of a deal. So it's not even that our parents take us out and whip us, it's just these little things like this that, make us feel like, geez, how am I going to, how can I be myself? How can I have to conform to my mother's expectations now? And it wasn't a major expectation. That's the only time she ever said, you should do this. My mom generally was, whatever I was doing, she was happy with it. I mean, I did all kinds of stuff as a kid. And my mom was happy. She never criticized or complained or said I was wasting my time ever. But that one single time that she did that, it was like, So, it just takes those little subtle things. So I'm giving that as an example. It's just these little subtle things that lock us up into this kind of diminished Ketu castle, where we're in a castle, but we don't know what the symbol of our flag is. As it turns out, I am a magician, right? There is no real magic. I can't pull a rabbit out of a hat. That's really magic. But the only real magical thing we can do is really praying for other people, healing other people through our presence, and predicting the future, right? So I always laugh that here I am a magician, I predict the future. That's magic, right? Magicians try to do that. They'll say, I'm going to predict what card you're going to pick out of this deck. And you pick a card and they show it, and they pull one out of their breast, that's the same card. They said, yeah, I knew you were going to pick this card. So I'm actually ended up being a magician, which is really ironic. And that was, I had such an inspiration. I want to do magic, you know. So we get shot down just by a glance from our parents, just by a casual world. And my mom wasn't angry. She wasn't mean. It was just a casual statement of, you're not going to really make money as a magician. But the truth is, you can make a lot of money as a magician. She just didn't know that, okay? Good magicians do, you know, quite well. So those little things mold us. We try to conform and mold to these expectations of these greater powers, which are namely our parents. It can other times be grandparents, some siblings, our peer pressure, but the greatest single influence is that of our parents. What if our parent is gone? What if our dad runs out when we're 3 months old? Yes, and that molds us, and we say, gosh, I would never run out. I would never leave somebody. And so you end up staying with a relationship that's wrong with you because you're never going to do what your dad did. You decided, I'm not going to do what my dad did. So you're still molded by your dad's actions instead of what's healthy for your sovereign country. All right? So as we live out the Ketu half of our castle, we're basically living out this way of being that's the result of the pressures put upon us mixed with who we are. It's this amalgamation of, yeah, this is who I am, but these are all the pressures upon me by the powers that be, especially my parents when I was a kid. And so now I'm trying to figure out how to live happily, and I can't do it. And it's really our parents are the formative thing. Like I said, Rahu and Ketu are the karakas of the D12, the parent and ancestors Varga. So we are molded by these people, and we share their DNA. So we literally are molded by their ways of being. Okay? But we don't want to be limited by that. We're molded by their ways of being in our immaturity, which means until the Rahu maturation. And being molded by their way of being, some of it's us, some of it's not really us, and here's the secret. A tremendous amount is us, but we hate it. We're not okay with it. A lot of how our parents are, it really is us. It's who we really are. How can it not be? We popped out of them, right? But we don't like that part, and we see that as a negative part, so we're not at peace with that part. And that also forms our Ketu castle. Something about us that is like our parent, that we hated in our parents, now we hate in ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves to be that way. But then we end up being that way without realizing it in a sick and twisted fashion. And as we mature, we learn, one of the huge things we have to learn, one of the most important things we have to learn is that the things we hate about our parents, the things our parents do that we hate, that hurt us the most, that we do those very same things to ourselves and to the other people in our lives. Until we're ready to acknowledge that and see that, we're not going to heal. That takes tremendous courage and compassion towards ourselves to be able to acknowledge those things. But we won't want to. We'll try to do anything but to acknowledge that I do the very same things that my parents do that I hated. If you can't say that, you're not healing. So this is a very serious part of healing the Rahu Ketu, which we'll get into more later. So, but the thing is it applied healthy or unhealthy? You know, the things your parent did that hurt you in the right situation could be very healing, helpful things. So it's not a matter of saying, oh, I would never do that, that's wrong. It's a matter of doing the right thing at the right time. That's what health is. Health is a state of being where we respond and react and relate to what's happening to us in accordance with what works, with what's healthy. Not in accordance of a security paradigm, Ketu, or in accordance with the fear, Rahu. Okay, or an expectation, or a hope, which is also, a hope is Rahu too, and an expectation is Ketu. Okay? We don't relate to life honestly. We're relating to life as modified by the fears of the jungle and the security we think we need of the castle. And so we decided that our parents were selfish, and that we're not going to be selfish no matter what. Then the times where it's healthy to be selfish, we won't be healthily selfish, and we'll ruin our lives. Because there's a time for selfishness. There's a time for giving. And we're healthy when we respond to life in accordance with the needs of life, which will be our needs too. But instead we respond to life saying, I'm always going to do this, I'll never do that, I can't do that, I won't do that, and then we're not living life. Then what we're doing is we're living in resistance to life, and we're not flowing with life. We don't flow with our purpose, we don't flow with the people in our lives, we have expectations for people that aren't shared. So I say you get into things like star-crossed lovers, the attraction where one person really wants a person, another person doesn't want that person. How can that contradiction exist? It can't exist. It's a delusional contradiction. That one or both people are out of flow with life. If they were both in the flow of life, one person would not be wanting another person who didn't want them in return. They would only want that if their fear or security paradigm is setting them up for that. So they want to be with the person they're with because they're scared to not be with that person. Or they want to be with a particular person because that person reminds them of their mommy or daddy, so they need to be with that person. That's not syncing with life. That's not flowing with life. There is no contradictions between people if each people is living in the moment and flowing with life. That contradiction cannot exist. Okay? But constantly in our lives we're having these contradictions. Why? Because one or both, usually both, people in some respects are not being in the flow of what's truthful to life, what's truthful to themselves. And by truthful I mean rid of fears and rid of needs. Because fears and needs are Ketu, fears are Rahu, have no place in truth. And it's those fears and needs that tear our ego apart, that causes pain and turmoil and frustration. Okay? But none of that's real. Life is what's real. And life has a flow that is going to happen. And if your needs and fears are not in alignment, if your needs and fears are not in alignment with that flow of life, you'll be in disharmony, you'll be sick, your Rahu and Ketus won't be balanced, and you'll be in conflict with life, which means you'll be in conflict with people. Okay? If we get into the sensation, the energy of life, and we live each moment in a healthy level, then there's no contradiction. Okay? Other people might have contradictions if they're not, but if you're doing that, there'll be no contradictions in your life. As long as there's contradictions in your life because there's still a need, a security need, a way you have to be or else you're not good enough, or if you're not this way, you're evil, if you're not this way, you're not good. There's something like that. Or there's a fear, okay, that you're not willing to risk, a cliff you're not willing to jump off of, that you're getting pushed towards. And then you will have conflict inside of ourselves. So conflict inside of ourselves only happens because of Rahu and Ketu. Because of wanting to stay in the jungle, wanting to stay in the castle when we need to go into the jungle for something, or not wanting to go into the jungle because it's too scary. Okay? And therefore retreating to the Ketu castle. Okay. So, and that's why I said the only thing we have to work on is Rahu and Ketu. All the other planets, all the things, all the avashtas, even the hard avashtas of those planets, are really just a result of conscious choices in our life. They make sense to us. But Rahu and Ketu bring this dynamic of deep-seated needs, deep-seated fears, things we just don't think would ever work for us, ways that we think we have to be in order to be okay with ourselves, that try to make us to force life be a certain way that it's not, and then we're having conflict. So conflict is a key word for dealing with Rahu and Ketu, because Rahu and Ketu are the planetary armies. What are the armies here for? To deal with conflict. So anytime you have a conflict in your life, what planets do you look towards? Rahu and Ketu. When there's conflict, Rahu and Ketu are involved. By conflict, I mean you can't make a decision, you're torn between two jobs, you're torn between this and that, you're torn between marriage and becoming a monk. Anytime there's a turmoilous conflict within yourself, or anytime you're having conflict with the person, like actual conflict with the person, like you don't get along with your wife, your sister, your father, your friend, and you're having a heated moment, Rahu and Ketu are the reasons you're conflicting. Because only Rahu and Ketu have conflict. Because only those deep fears of Rahu and those deep security needs of Ketu will ever cause us to act in a way that's not in harmony with life. And only then is there conflict. Okay? So, the security paradigm of Ketu, there's not a good enough word to explain it. Okay? I am going to talk a lot more about that after we cover the planets, but basically, the security paradigm ultimately means to be okay. With what? With ourselves. The only thing in this world are ourselves. Everything is an omen of our relationship with ourselves. Every person that comes up and says, I love you or hate you, is an omen of your relationship with yourself. Every conflict you have in this world is a symbol, an omen of conflict you have within yourself because of your Rahu and Ketus. Okay? So, the security paradigm is this idea that I'll be okay with myself if I do this. Okay? I'll be safe if I do it this way. And safe means I'll be okay with myself. And how do I know I'm okay with myself? Because external pressures are not going to hurt me. I'm not getting negative glances from my loved ones. And sure, at first, the negative glance came from my mom. The scowl came from my dad. And so as a kid, I learned to look for those glances and scowls and modify my behavior so I wouldn't get in trouble or get glanced at negatively. Then I moved out, and that was really nice for 6 months. And then I met my partner. And then with my partner, I'm getting the same glances and scowls, and I'm looking for the same things. And wow, I'm having the same relationship with my partner as I do with my parent. So I'm going to decide not to have a partner, and I get rid of my partner, and I move to the ashram. In the ashram, I have a superior. And I'm having the same relationship with my superior as I had with my spouse, as I had with my parent. And so you'll see we're constantly creating similar relationships. Different, yeah, in some ways. You're not humping your parents and you're not humping your superior at the ashram, I hope. And you are humping your spouse. But underneath all that, the game, the subtle game that's being played, the Rahu Ketu game that's being played under all the stuff you're actively doing with that person, has a similar thread, a similar vein. So yeah, people marry their mothers, they marry their fathers, you know. They're attracted to the man or woman who has a quality reminiscent of their parent, okay? And sometimes you can see it so easily. Even with astrology, you look at their parents' chart and then you look at their girlfriend's or boyfriend's or wife or husband's chart and you go, wow, look how many planets are similar. Look how many same things are in these two charts. And then you add the card system to it and you'll even see, wow, you know, your mom has a loaded, you know, 8 of diamonds and your husband is an 8 of diamonds. Wow, you know, it's like you'll see these stark similarities of attracting the same type of energy. And it's therefore having a similar thread to our relationships. And that's all because of the need to experience a conflict, an uncomfortable situation, a disappointment, whatever, something that hurts, in order for us to resolve this great battle that Rahu and Ketu are intent on fighting. But what we have to learn, and what Rahu eventually is here to teach us, that the battle is not about these things. It's about our relationship to ourselves. That the same relationship we have with our parents, we have with ourselves. So ask yourself, how do I feel about my mom? Well, and if you say, I love my mom, but I really feel sorry for her because she's just sort of pathetic. Well, that's how you feel about yourself. Then ask your sibling, how do you feel about mom? And they'll say, oh, I think mom's like super creative, but I don't feel like she's really smart sometimes. Well, that's how your sibling feels about himself. We all have, every sibling has a different idea of their parent. There'll be some crossovers, but they'll never be identical. Because the way they're relating to their parent is how they're relating to themselves. So ask yourself, how am I relating to my parent? What do I love and hate about my parent? What makes me want to kill or run from my parent? What makes me want to hug and love my parent? That's when you can explain those to yourself, those things to yourself honestly. That's your Rahu Ketu axis. That's your nodes. That's your relationship with yourself. And if you can take the step and really allow yourself to realize that that's your relationship with yourself, and that you're not a victim of your parents, but that you're a victim of how you relate to yourself, then you're really on the path to healing, okay, to balancing the nodes. So The goal of Ketu is to be okay with itself. But the problem is, it has certain ideas of what's required to be okay with itself. In order to be okay with myself, I can't do magic, but I can do science. Like for me, I grew up in a family of scientists. My dad's a scientist. Grandfather was a scientist. I come of scientific lineage. So it's okay for me to do science, but it's not okay for me to do magic. Okay? Yet here I am doing magic, but I call it science. So you see, I call it science. I'm going to have a scientific approach to astrology. I'm going to work out the calculations while I'm doing magic. So if I'm really honest with myself, I'm doing magic. And I'm calling it science, perhaps. Okay? So we literally adapt ourselves to these pressures in our lives. Okay? And we become a scientist because being a scientist is acceptable, but being a magician is not. Okay? Another person might have grown up in a family where being scientific and being intellectual was not highly regarded, but living in the moment, being spontaneous with one's feelings, even if those were very negative feelings and abusive feelings, was the norm. So these people, they call themselves doing magic, and they say, oh, I'm intuitive and I'm not really scientific, but then they are doing astrology, which is a science. So it's the same story in reverse. So we're trying to be okay with ourselves, okay, and have a healthy relationship with ourselves. And we think we have to be a certain way, as I was saying. I have to be scientific to be okay with myself, because science was advocated growing up, magic was not, okay? But that's not healthy, because I can't always be scientific, right? So this is a really simple, cheesy example. Usually it's much more painful stuff. I'm kind of making a fun, light example here. If I can't be okay with myself for doing magic, which I do, then how can I be okay with myself? I can't be, right? So we think we have to be a certain way or label ourselves a certain way. I have to be good. I can't be bad. That's the most common way in order to be okay with myself. But if I always have to be good, all of a sudden my choices in life become diminished. If I can do no harm, I only have to do nice things, my choices in life become diminished. And there's no freedom to what life wants. So if life wants you to have something or experience something, it's going to hurt other people. Like today, I had a choice. I could teach a video to you guys, or I could call a friend and hang out for 3 hours on the phone talking to a friend I haven't had. That's a choice that I have every day. Okay, I could call a friend I haven't hooked up with in a while, or I can make a video. Okay? Well, if I don't call the friend gets hurt. If I don't make the videos, you guys get hurt, because you're going, I want that next video. I'm about to make my Rahu Ketu breakthrough, and I need that next Rahu Ketu video, then I know, aha, I'll get it. So I'm going to hurt somebody in this situation. So if I have this security paradigm of I won't hurt anybody no matter what, then how would I do that? I would have to make a video while I'm talking to a person. It can't be done. So everything we do hurts somebody else while helping somebody else. But we can't have a security paradigm saying, I will do no harm, because you will. So say you go to choose a restaurant. I can have Thai food today, or I can have a pizza. Well, I'm going to have Thai food. Well, maybe the pizza guy needs a little more business, and a month later he's closed. And maybe if you'd gone, it would have just made the difference between him staying open and not. Okay? So he got hurt because you didn't go there. But maybe the guy at the Thai restaurant, was about to close, but then you came and bought so much food because you were so much hungry. He said, wow, and you were so happy eating it, and you were so thankful. He goes, yeah, I really love my restaurant business. I'm not going to take that corporate job after all. So you helped him. So every action we take helps one person, hinders another. So we can't live by the paradigm of, I won't hurt anyone no matter what. Then at that point we have to just lock ourselves in a room and do nothing. And that's always what happens with Ketu. We always create an idea that I can't do this no matter what, or I have to do this always. And then we can't live a healthy, normal life. We can't flow with life, because flowing with life is about going here, going there, helping this person, not being available for this person. How do you do it all at once? You can't. Time doesn't allow that. If there wasn't a thing as linear time, sure, we could do it all at once. But because we're stuck with linear time, we will always hurt something every time we do something, make any choice in our life. Okay? I made a choice this year to renovate my house. Making that choice hurt everyone who wanted to do my videos because I've taught less video. It hurt a lot of people who wanted readings. Okay? So, but it's a choice for some reason I was prompted to make. Okay? So, the security paradigm of Ketu becomes so restrictive that we end up locking ourselves in a prison. And then the castle is no longer a safe place, it's a prison. And then we're stuck and we're miserable there. Okay? Remember, the key planets for Ketu are the Sun and Saturn. Ketu is the king, Sun is the kingdom, Saturn is the prison. So there's a point where Ketu becomes the prison. Because we've reduced our opportunities in life. We decided I can only be this way. I can never do this. Or a very classical one is, I always have to help everybody. I always got to tell people what they need to do to be happy. Okay? Well, now you've created another prison in your life of loneliness. Because people don't like to be told what to do to be happy, right? Okay? We want to get away from those external pressures of telling us what to do. The positive looks and the negative looks that people give us for what we do. Because only then can we become free to explore ourselves, right? All these problems started because of the negative and positive responses we received from our parents. And then we adapted to those negative and positive responses. So the last thing we want is positive and negative responses from people now. We want to get away from that with acceptance. So we want acceptance from our loved ones, right? We want acceptance from our friends. We want to get away from the positive, negative responses so that we can find out what we really are. Because it's living in accordance with people's positive and negative responses, particularly our parents, that cause us to lock ourselves into this Ketu castle and say, this is my narrow way of being. And what we really want is freedom, and the jungle offers freedom. The castle has laws. You can do this, you can't do that. It's no fun to be in the Ketu castle because it's all about laws, rules, regulations, allowances, punishments, you know. And we will literally punish ourselves if we do something that our Ketu castle laws don't allow for. We'll feel guilty, we'll feel shame, we'll get depressed, we'll tell ourselves we can never be happy. We'll do all these things as punishment for infringing upon the laws of the Ketu castle. But the jungle is free, you know. Cortez went over and wiped out Indians, you know, Native Americans of South America, just wiped them out. You know, he had the full freedom just to wipe these people out, right? Well, he couldn't have done that anywhere else. He couldn't have marched into Portugal and wiped all the Portuguese off the face of the earth, because that was in the castle, the European castle, right? He just wouldn't have been allowed to do that. You know, the slavers weren't allowed to just go to France and grab a bunch of slaves in the 17 and 1600s. They could do that, you know, 1,000 years before. In 600 AD, they could go to France and grab some slaves. But they couldn't do that in 1600 because the Ketu castle had grown into this European sort of, you know, existence. But they could go to Africa, into the jungles of Africa, and grab a bunch of slaves, and then go and sell those to the jungles of South America and North America, right? So the jungle gives you freedom to do whatever you want to do. And that's why we need to go there, because only in that freedom can we find out what we really are. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we're supposed to go into the jungle and rape and murder and steal, right? But just an example of how when we're free from the restrictions of the scowls and appraisals of other people, we can become ourselves and find out who we really are. When we're free and all that's removed from our presence. But the only place we can experience that is if we go to Rahu, if we go into the jungle. Because the jungle is where there's no rules. Okay? There's just exploration. So one of the things about the Rahu is it allows for exploration. It helps you get away from all the routine relationships. all the routine scowls, all the routine appraisals that we attract, all those same relationships of I relate to my parents this way, I relate to myself this way, I relate to my spouse this way, I relate to my boss this way, just on very subtly different levels, but the thread is one continuous similar thread. By getting away from all that and going into the jungle, at that point, we can start becoming who we really are. And we can't really go into the jungle until we have a greater level of self-acceptance. Okay? Because without self-acceptance, we won't allow ourselves the freedom to explore the jungle or to explore the Rahu side of the chart. Okay? Without self-acceptance, we're going to stay in the Ketu castle and behave in accordance with the scowls and appraisals, or not appraisals, scowls, appraisals, and approvals of our upbringing. And then we're just going to live that same life with different faces. But they're always behind it is the same glare, the same look, the same smile that we got from our parents. Okay? The same frustrations, the same pain, and the same relationship with ourselves. So by going into the jungle, we get the opportunity to have a different relationship with ourselves. And having a different relationship with ourselves is what heals us, which makes us go, aha, I've grown. Then we can go back to the Ketu castle and say, look what I brought home from the New World. I brought lots of gold, lots of goodies, lots of yummies, and a whole new culture to trade with because I decided not to kill all that entire culture, which would be, of course, the healthy way to do it. You go into that Rahu house and you care for the jungle. You take care of the jungle and you benefit from the jungle. The fact that Cortez goes out into the jungle and they wipe out all the native Southern Americans and take their gold and everything, the reason they did that is because their Ketu castle wasn't strong enough. Okay? Because Spain invested in that trip. Spain needed the money to maintain strength in Europe. There was still a time when Europeans were fighting amongst each other on a regular basis, right? There was always wars going on in Europe. So they desperately needed the gold of South America to maintain themselves as a powerful, and to grow into a powerful European nation. And so for a period of about 100 years, Spain was the most powerful European nation because of the gold they took. And because they weren't strong enough to not take that gold. Cortez had to come back with booty, with gold and treasure and wealth. He had to, otherwise Spain was not going to thrive. And Spain was not thriving healthy enough. They were willing to take the risk. Now, Spain had been a grand nation, a powerful, secure, safe nation without threats of neighboring countries. They could have gone there and they could have appreciated the culture and they wouldn't have needed to destroy and take everything from these amazing cultures that they destroyed. Same with us. If we go into the jungle with the Ketu weakness, with not being secure and confident within ourselves, not being healthy within ourselves, not our hearts being aligned with our minds, then when we go into the Rahu jungle, we muck it up. The same way Cortez ruined South America. Okay? That's why when we go into the Rahu jungle, we always screw up and have problems in the beginning and in the middle and for a long time. Because we're simply not solid enough in ourselves. Our sovereign country of ourself is not secure enough to not go into the jungle and destroy it. The same way that Spain was not a powerful, secure enough nation to not go to South America and not desperately need the wealth of South America. They couldn't have come back empty-handed. They needed that money, okay? They couldn't be the laughingstocks of Europe. Europe was fighting amongst themselves. If they were such a powerful country that they could have just gone there and came back and said, wow, we discovered a whole amazing culture. But we brought back no money, we just made some friends. A powerful, healthy country could have said that. Unfortunately, that was simply not the state of the world, and it's really probably not the state of the world now. We'll find that out when we space travel to another country, and if we rape and abuse it and take from it, or do we cherish it and respect it, that'll be determined by our level of security as a globe, as a global nation at some point, perhaps, if we actually do space travel. Okay, So, but even in small things, we see many places are not solid and secure enough on themselves enough to not go rape and take from others' weaker countries. That still happens. But a truly healthy country never has that need to do that. Okay? Vikings pillaged because they couldn't grow enough food on their own. So they traveled out to England and to try to survive. If they had had a healthy culture that created plenty of food for their well-being and their family's well-being, why would they want to risk their lives, their legs, their limbs, their sons, by going into a really scary battle situation? No one does that unless they have a great need. So we don't. Anytime we go into the jungle, towards the Rahu side of the chart, with any vulnerabilities, with any insecurity, with any personal weakness, we will muck up the jungle to some degree. So you can tell, how good am I doing with myself? By seeing, how good am I doing with the jungle? The fact that Cortez had to kill all the Indians shows that Spain was really not doing good with itself at that time. Okay? Same with us. When we go into the Ketu house, if we muck it up, it shows we're really not doing that good with ourselves. But now we know that. Now we saw it in practice. As long as we stay in the Ketu castle, it seems like we're doing good enough with ourselves. And then we go into the Rahu house, and everything goes to hell to show us that we're really not doing that good with ourselves. So how successful we are in the jungle, the Rahu side of the chart, shows how well we're doing with ourselves, how good we feel about ourselves, how well we're aligned with ourselves, how confident we are in who we really are, how much we really recognize and see the symbol of life that's on our flag. Okay? How much of a sovereign individual we are that's healthy, and by healthy I don't mean always good, because like I mentioned, you can't walk across the street without stepping on a bug, right? But you have to walk across the street to heal the sick person in the house across the street. So the bug has to die, right? Every choice hurts something. But healthy means being aligned with ourselves, being okay with ourselves, having essentially peace instead of conflict. Okay? You can tell how healthy your Rahu Ketu axis are between how much conflict and peace you have in your life. That's why the gurus say develop peace, have mental peace. If you meditate, you'll have peace. And we don't really know what peace is. When people say that word peace, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to have such a boring life. So a lot of people relate peace to boredom. But peace is not. It's a subtle joy of okayness that we all need to grow into. And as we grow into it, our Rahu and Ketus are becoming less of a problem. Okay, so hope this gives you a better idea. Now, also, we have planets are in the Ketu side, the castle side, or planets are in the jungle side. Houses are also in the Ketu side or the jungle side. So let's say you've got a person with Ketu in the third house from their ascendant. Their ascendant's closer to Ketu than it is to Rahu, which means that they're going to relate to Ketu in the first house to some degree. If you talk to them about Ketu in the first house, they'll relate to it to some degree. Ketu in the second house will relate to it more. Ketu in the first house relate to it the most. Ketu in the 12th house from the Lagna will relate to Ketu in the first house too. Once Ketu gets over here, once the Lagna gets past 90 degrees, they won't relate to Ketu in the first house at all. They'll start relating to Rahu in the first. And if Rahu's in the second, they'll relate to Rahu in the first quite a bit. Okay? So, the houses also are in the jungle or in the castle. The most important houses are 1, 4, 7, and 10. Just ignore the rest of them. Okay, the angular houses, the cusps, not the equal houses, but the cusp. The Bhavachalita cusp of 1, 4, 7, and 10. See where they fall in the jungle. If the first cusp is closer to Ketu than Rahu, then relate to them as Ketu in the first house. They're dealing with Ketu in the first house issues. So break it into quadrants. Find out which angle, 1, 4, 7, or 10, is closer to Ketu and Rahu. If it's not 1 or 7, it'll be 4 or 10. And we always want to look at the chart to see what angular house is closest to Ketu, and which house is closest to Rahu, which will always be the opposite of the other house. So it'll be either 410 or 17. So remember the videos I talked about, 1st house, 7th house Rahu Ketus, and 4th house, 10th house Rahu Ketus. Those videos apply to everybody, to lesser degrees though. But find out which video or which one applies to every person, and realize that if they have Ketu in the 3rd, well, the closest angular house will probably be the 4th cusp. So literally measured in degrees though. What house of 1, 4, 7, or 10 is closest to Ketu? And read them as Ketu in that house. And you can start the reading like that, and then you can deviate into the actual smaller houses. But the closest angular house is always going to be impacted by Rahu and Ketu. Because the angles are the key houses. In fact, we can do a lot of amazing astrology just with houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. We can just toss the other house cusps. And if we just focused on those 4 house cusps and did a good job with them, we would probably do everything we really needed to do. Okay? But for predicting events and predictions, we really need all these other houses. But for like growth and development and psychology, we really only need houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. So are they a Ketu 4th house person, Ketu 7th house person, Ketu 10th house person, or Ketu 1st house person? Everyone is one of those 4 types of people. Okay? And you want to read them and understand them as that. Okay? And then what house cusp 1, 4, 7, or 10 is closest to Rahu? That's the house cusp that's in the deepest jungle from them, the important cusp that's deepest in the jungle. And we have to look at the angular houses because those 4 houses are the houses of acting. Okay? Acting in accordance with Dharma, 1st house, in accordance with Kama, 7th house, Moksha, 4th house, and Artha, 10th house. It's taken an action in that world. The problem with Rahu and Ketu is we get paralyzed. We don't take action. Ketu doesn't take action because it's stuck on a certain way of being. There's too many rules. You have to do it this way or you're not good. You have to do it this way or something. There's too many rules with Ketu to act. With Rahu, geez, it's too unknown. It's too scary to act. So we're paralyzed in action wherever Rahu and Ketu are. So whatever cusp, 1, 4, 7, 10, whatever action cusp is closest to Rahu and Ketu are the action cusp where we're paralyzed in very different ways. Okay? Ketu cusp, the closest cusp to Ketu of 1, 4, 7, 10, it appears like we're very active in that area. So if Ketu is closest to the 10th cusp, they're so active in their actions and what they're doing, but they're active in a stuck way. Okay? They're only doing it in a certain way, not in a way of fullness and abundance and life, but in a stuck, sick, pathological way. Okay? So keep that in mind. I'll probably do a video on that more with some chart examples down, later on in this course. Okay? But the point I'm making is, even the house cusp are in the castle or in the jungle. Okay? Keep that in mind. Okay, so I think that's enough for you to think upon on Rahu and Ketu to give a deeper understanding. You need to spend hundreds of hours contemplating this idea of Rahu and Ketu and the castle and the jungle. And that's why I keep going back to talking about this. And I'm not done yet. I'm like, every time I want to add a new facet to it and really get you thinking about this long term. This is not something you can just think about once. I think about Rahu and Ketu, jungle, and castle all the time. It's something I spend thousands of hours contemplating and thinking on. And it's just so important. Okay, one other thing we got to cover in this video though. Ketu is moving reversed. Any planets behind Ketu, before Rahu, are going to be influenced by Ketu. Which means those planets need to be resolved and completed. So the planets that are in the Ketu castle, that Ketu is moving towards, are planets the person can complete within their security paradigm Ketu. Okay? They're in their comfort zone to complete those and develop those to completion and resolution. Okay, what we could say is to perfect those. But perfect just means better. Of course, it doesn't mean perfect. Now, the planets that are in the jungle, but Ketu is still moving towards them, those are the planets that the person is equally in need of completing and resolving the karmas with. But they won't resolve those karmas until they go into the jungle. So they have to go into the jungle of Rahu to complete those karmas. So it's like, here you've got a friend in town, and you owe this friend $100. And then you're karmically balanced and you can be enlightened, okay? So you just go down to the, your friend's house, you knock on his door, and you say, hey dude, here's that $100, and you get enlightened, and you're all done. But this is a friend that got lost in the jungle. And you got to give him $100 before you can move on with life. So that means you have to go into the jungle, find your friend, and give him the $100 you own to have karmic balance. Okay? It's a lot more work to make completion with something you have to go into the jungle with, right? Than is to complete something that is just that live down the road from your, in your Ketu castle somewhere. So keep that in mind. That's one thing that's happening. The other thing that's happening is Rahu's moving backwards. So every planet behind Rahu until you get to Ketu, even if it's a billionth of a degree from Ketu, Rahu's still moving towards it. Those are things that you need new experiences with. You have to relate to those things in new ways. You have to make a transformation with those things, which means you need to learn to appreciate those things in a new light. You have to learn to see those things in a completely different way. Whereas Ketu, the things it's moving towards, you have to resolve those things. You have to come to a peaceful conclusion with those things, okay? But Rahu things, we have to totally change how we see those things. So, if Rahu's moving towards a planet that's in the jungle, then we go into the jungle, and once we're in the jungle, we transform those things really readily. Okay? Because now that we're in the jungle, we're going to naturally see those things in a new light. It's as simple as, I live in the castle and it's dark and I have torches on the wall, so everything I see in the castle I see with torchlight. Then I go into the jungle and I see something with the natural light of the sun. And I see it in a whole new light because I'm in the jungle. So just going into the jungle helps a person see those planets in a new light. Then there's the planets that Rahu's moving towards that need to get transformed, seen with a new light, that are in the Ketu castle. So those were the ones that a person has to go into the Rahu house, go into the jungle, see things from another point of view, and then come back into the Ketu castle and see those things in a new light in the castle though. Okay? So it's a little bit more of a tricky business because the tendency is to, when we're outside, things look different, and we go back inside to Ketu, and we want things to look the same. Because we're used to them being a certain way. So for instance, you go to, you grew up in America, okay, and you're an American. And American men are a certain way to you. Okay, you have a certain relationship to American men. And therefore you have a certain relationship to men. Okay? Then you go over to, say, you'll go to Russia, let's say. Okay? You go to Russia and you get a completely different experience of men. Because now you're dealing with foreign men. You're in the jungle. The foreign, Rahu's foreign, right? And you get a totally different experience with men. So now you've got a different experience of men. That was pretty easy to see because you were in a completely different culture where the men act completely different. Okay? So that pretty much happens automatically. That's going to happen. If you go to another country, you'll get a completely different view of men. Okay? Based on how the men are in that culture. But let's say, instead, you go to Russia and you get a different experience of life because you're in Russia, but you meet no Russian men. Then you come back to America, and now, because your experience of life is different, you're going to see American men as different than you did before, simply because you went to Russia, even if you didn't meet one. Even if you didn't meet any Russian men. But you're still used to seeing those men as American men. So you have all these biases and ideas about the American man. And your experience of, your experience of having new experiences in another country have to sort of work against your biases of what you already think about American men. So it's a little harder because you're so fixed in your ideas about American men to change your mind about them, okay? To allow your experiences to affect how you feel about them, okay? So the planets that Rahu's moving in the Ketu castle, it's a bit of a bigger crunch to see those things in a new light. We need to see those things in a new light, but we're so used to seeing them a certain way, it's harder to see them in a new light, and therefore it takes longer to see them in a new light. Okay? All right. So keep that in mind, and we'll probably do some more videos on that topic as well. Okay? Okay. Enough on that. Thank you.